Hello, and welcome to Off the Fence, a podcast where we deconstruct difficult decision making so we can try to find out what keeps us stuck, and more importantly, how do we get unstuck? I'm your host, Karen Covey, a former divorce lawyer, mediator, and arbitrator turned coach, author, and entrepreneur. And with me today is Bethany Dotson. Bethany is a trauma-informed yoga therapist and relationship coach with over a decade of experience helping midlife career women heal anxiety, PTSD, and find their power and skyrocket their confidence after a divorce or a toxic relationship. She also helps them communicate better, navigate conflict, and most importantly, co-create healthy relationships. Bethany is a domestic violence survivor and thriver who helps women triumph over trauma, break their cycle of emotionally unavailable partners, and attract the love they so deeply desire. Bethany, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am excited to have you. And I want to dive in with the question that's just sort of been burning in my soul, which is, what drew you to this kind of work? How did you get involved in it?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think, I didn't consciously choose it at first. I had a private practice as a yoga therapist, combined with a lifetime of choosing unhealthy partners myself. And I found in my yoga therapy practice, I attracted clients who in the onset were wanting to heal their anxiety or their insomnia or wanting to perform better at work. They had a lot of work burnout symptoms. And within 1 to 3 sessions, people would inevitably divulge that, I just got a divorce. I think my partner is an abuser. I think I need to leave this person. So there was always a relationship thread, always. And I was fascinated with that. And so after a few years of like the universe bringing me these people, it's like, well, let's just focus on this. I used to hide or feel a lot of shame about my past relationship choices. And I feel like everything worked out in the end because I'm able to use all of the bad things that I chose and went through and all that's, to help other people avoid repeating that cycle. So yeah, that's how I got here.
That's really interesting that there was the relationship thread through all of the other physical symptoms, so to speak.
Absolutely.
I've heard of a lot of kinds of therapy. I have to admit, I haven't really heard of yoga therapy.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah. So it's very small and not widely known. So yoga therapy is basically the practice, or it's another word of becoming emotionally regulated, noticing what's happening in your body, being aware of your body's responses to things. We say, I felt a gut feeling about him, or I just knew, I felt it in my heart. I had to pick up the phone. So these things are, in my opinion, a higher intelligence, maybe connected to source or something else. But yoga therapy specifically uses the movements of yoga. A lot of people associate yoga with, I have to be flexible. I have to have a certain body. It's going to make me flexible. And it's going to relax me. Like those are the 3 common things that I hear. And it's so much more than that. So much more than that. So yoga therapy uses the movements, breath, meditations designed to rewire how you think and how you feel. It uses body-based somatic experiencing work. Somatic experiencing means I thought about this memory, it came to my mind, oh, what's happening here, and explore what that means in your body and how that feels in your body. so that's basically what it is. It's hard to describe. It's an experience. It's an experiential practice. So putting it into words can kind of sound difficult, but the goal of yoga therapy, specifically trauma yoga therapy, is to rewire someone's brain out of that trauma imprint. When somebody's brain is imprinted from a trauma or a series of traumas they've had, as in complex trauma in the walls of a relationship, their body has a reaction to it. So they feel anxious, they can't sleep, they overanalyze things, they don't trust themselves. And this causes them to really limit how they live their lives. They tend to live a very closed, small life and fear taking risks. So yoga therapy, specifically trauma yoga therapy, is about rewiring that process.
So it sounds like the work that you do is primarily the trauma yoga therapy, right?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. And now this may be a weird question, please forgive me, but you
Sure.
said that you had started out by helping people who had, like, they couldn't sleep, or they had stomach issues, or whatever it was, they had a physical symptom that they came to you as a yoga therapist to deal with. And when you dug, you inevitably found the relationship issue. Then you started focusing on people who had the relationship issues from trauma, it sounds like. Did they also then have the physical symptoms?
Yes. Almost, I would say 80% of the clients that I work with have physical symptoms, physical manifestations of the trauma, anxiety, IBS, IBD, binge eating, sleep issues, their hair is falling out, reproductive issues. So all of this is from, we have a fight or flight system to help us stay safe, right? And keep us alive. But most people are living in their fight or flight response and they don't know it. It just feels normal for them. And then, yeah.
So is it, if I'm understanding you correctly, you just kind of get used to the way that you feel, and then that becomes your new normal?
You get used, I don't know if you ever truly get used to the way that you feel. A lot of people that I work with settle and have been resigned to that, and then they turn to coping mechanisms to help them feel something. So when people have unresolved trauma, they tend to feel numb on some level or not enough on the inside, and they turn to sensation seeking activities like being a workaholic, taking risks that, shopping, spending too much money, or they turn to numbing out. Workaholism again is a numbing activity as well. Drinking too much wine at night, being on their phone, just kind of like numbing themselves. Staying chronically busy is a big symptom that I see a lot, just to avoid feeling anything.
So, and the people that you're working with, are these people who have been involved in a toxic relationship, are still involved in a toxic relationship? Tell me about that.
They have been involved in a toxic relationship and they've already made the decision to leave, even if that was extremely painful. They got to the point in the relationship where they realized, I have to make a different choice. I have to leave. So those are the people that I work with. Unfortunately, the healing doesn't just magically happen when you decide to leave. There's a whole lot that has to happen in order to, go from leaving that partner to becoming a woman who is worthy of receiving.
Yeah. And I know that's hard for a lot of people, especially women, to feel worthy. How do you help women to get to that point? To really, because it's one thing to say it, oh yeah, I'm worthy, I'm, what, but if you don't own it, if you're not that, it's not the same. So how do you get women to start to really feel and believe that they are worthy?
Yeah. So first addressing the inner and then addressing the outer. So when I say addressing the inner, I give all of my clients a daily somatic therapy practice that is designed to kind of break their addiction to coping skills like busyness, being a people pleaser, anxiety, beating themselves up, the inner critic. So that's designed to turn their focus inward and just be really aware of their thoughts and how they're feeling. That practice alone starts to shift a lot of stuck thinking patterns and ways that they react emotionally in their lives. Then we start to dive into their subconscious beliefs. So if somebody's, living in fight or flight and they're constantly busy, it's really hard to shift their thinking because they're too stressed or they're too contracted, they're too keyed up. So we relax them a little bit with a somatic work and get them used to feeling okay doing nothing and used to feeling relaxed and get their nervous system calmed down and get that pattern pretty set. And then we address their subconscious beliefs that they have. And a lot of people on some level know that they're the problem. They know that they're the common denominator, but they don't know why. They don't know the specific, like, why do I keep doing this? And so we dig a little deeper to understand their limiting beliefs about themselves, about what they believe they're capable of having. And we start to shift those. And then we bring that to the outer by having them take actions out of their comfort zone every week. When somebody has trauma, they tend to want to control their life after. They don't want to take, they garden. I'm not going to date. I'm never going to date. I hate dating apps. I'm too old. I'm going to stick with this one job, even though I hate it because I know I can't get any. So all of that stems from their inner world. So once we start to shift this inner world, we have to anchor that with behavior outside. So it can't be like a theory that we learn on the therapy couch, but we don't ever take it with us. So I give them actions to take outside of their comfort zone to widen their window of tolerance to new experiences. They might meet the feelings of rejection or abandonment or the feeling of something's wrong with me in those experiences. But the gift of stepping out of your comfort zone, taking yourself on dates. I have them do all kinds of things that like they look at the assignment, they're like, oh my God, I can't do that. And then they do it and they're like, oh my gosh. The beauty of that is that they're able to bring the inner work with them to the outer. And they get a result and they're like, oh, and then they feel like, oh, I kept telling myself I would never be able to do this. And look, I did it. And then that creates that positive reinforcement, that emotional reaction they have to doing it creates the momentum and they keep going.
That's awesome. And I really hope that people hear what you're saying, because our tendency, my tendency, as well as, as every other human on the planet, is like, okay, I see the exterior manifestation. Like I see that, things aren't going in my life the way I want to. Okay, I'm going to work harder, or I'm going to try to fix that thing. It's like we all focus on the outside to fix whatever the problem is, because that's where we see it, right? And we don't turn and look inside. And what you're saying about limiting beliefs is fascinating. Do you find that there are certain common limiting beliefs that someone who's experienced trauma in a relationship has?
Yeah, the number one belief I hear is there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. I've made it this far. I've never had a healthy relationship. Usually the belief that there's something wrong with me started long ago in childhood from some type of an adverse childhood experience. A lot of the people that I work with are overachievers. They borderline on work burnout. A lot of the people that I work with are in healthcare. They have very poor boundaries, and that all stems from the belief, the fundamental belief that there's something wrong with me. And in order for people to like me and for me to feel worthy and for me to be approved of, I have to work really hard. people aren't walking around saying that, but that's what they're feeling way back in here. And then it becomes this vicious cycle. So by the time they're 40 or 50, the infamous midlife crisis, right? We can't do it that way anymore.
Yeah. And it sounds like, if I'm, understanding what you're saying properly, from the outside, like if you or I were to meet someone like that, they would just look like super successful, super high achieving, high functioning people. You'd never know in a million years what their inner dialogue was like.
Yes. And I feel that that makes it in some ways even worse, because I feel like people who appear to be successful and who are successful on paper, but who don't feel that way inside, carry a lot of shame. And sometimes that shame stops them from getting help, or stops them from truly taking the courageous step to change.
Yeah, because change is never easy. It's scary. And it sounds like the things you're asking them to do are scary. Like, I don't know if I would like you if you were my coach.
I know, I get it. Sometimes my clients don't like me. They get on a coaching call and they're like, they're in a certain week and they're like, you want me to do what? So, yeah.
But and I see that with my clients as well. It's like, when you can do the thing that you don't think you can do, and we're not talking about world-changing things. It's small baby steps at a time. And once you make that first step, you're like, oh, I guess that worked. I guess I could. And it starts to build a confidence. I mean, the women that I see, and the men, both, because I work with both, but the humans that I see post-divorce are fundamentally different than the ones that were thinking about divorce, that were pre-divorce. And the changes that they've made are often like unbelievably good, right? But they were scary.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you convince a client, yes, you can?
So this starts with, there's two answers to this. I can never convince anybody to change, and I can never convince anybody, yes, you can. The people who I work with, who are successful, have already arrived at the decision before they ever get on the phone with me that something has to change. Now that voice may be small, and it may be buried under mountains of fear and the critic in her mind going, oh, what are you doing? You're never going to be able to make any change, right?
Right.
But they are willing to listen to that voice that says, I have to change. So the people, I never convince anybody that they can. They come to the phone to their initial breakthrough session with an inkling. Some people come and they're like, I have to make changes. Most people like it's a small voice. It's like the intuition that told her to leave her husband at year 1 and she stayed 25 more years, right? So it's that she's listening to that small voice. In the work, I'm not a fan of the word convincing because I feel like I've got to pull somebody. My objective is to help them realize the limiting thinking that they're doing. So whenever I have somebody step out of their comfort zone, or if they have a life challenge, or life's going to continue to happen when we're working together, they get wobbly. I say, you're going to have some wobbles. They get wobbly and they get knocked off balance. Yeah. And then because they're knocked off balance, all their old habits want to show up again. So in order to, I'll use your word, to convince them that they can, we look at like what's really happening. First of all, never judging or shaming anybody if they think that they can't, obviously. But helping them to emotionally reconnect to what they want, because sometimes when people hit challenges or wobbles, they get very focused on that and they lose sight of why they're here, their purpose, what they really want. So we reconnect emotionally to what they want. And then we dive deep and look at like, okay, what's the story you're telling yourself that's blocking you from going here? Is that story going to be helpful for you? Is that story going to be conducive for you to get from here to there?
Say more about the story. What are the stories people tell themselves? And I know a lot of people, they take offense with the word. What do you mean? I don't have a story. This is my life,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, I make sure, first of all, that I'm working with somebody who takes ownership ahead of time, that they are the common denominator, and that they're aware that they're standing in their own way. They have some awareness. They might not like admitting that, but they already have that awareness around the story. Could you repeat the question again? The story, how do I?
It's like, how do you talk to people about their story, and what is a story? Because we all think this is just the way it is. This is my life, right? And
Yeah.
how do you explain to somebody that this is a story that they're telling themselves, which means if it's a story, you have the ability to tell yourself a different story.
Yeah. So a lot of curiosity and compassion, asking questions. You know, a lot of the stories that I hear, especially when people hit wobbles, this will not work for me. I always fail at things. I failed at every relationship. I'm failing at work. I'm failing my kids. They go back to the story of I'm a failure. And that's just what I found is their fear taking over. So we look at that story and, okay, is that really true? Did you really fail your kids? Where are other examples in your life that you won, that you overcame adversity? Clients who have kids, I always go back to, well, you gave birth to your kids. That wasn't easy. You did that. I have some clients who are physicians or attorneys. They had to go through rigorous training. That wasn't easy. You did that. You didn't think you could do that probably 100 times. And here you are. So I always go back when I'm trying to reframe that story to, where are other examples in your life that you have forgotten about, that you are not giving yourself credit for, that we can say, oh, here's a time you did that. Here's a time you did that.
I love that, because as humans, what you're saying is that we don't have just one story, right? There are a lot of different stories, and we choose to remember certain stories, and that can either keep us stuck or help us break free. Is that
Absolutely correct. We have to choose the story and emotionally back it up.
And how do you help people to choose the story that's empowering versus the one that keeps them stuck?
Through a really open dialogue, asking questions. The most important thing is helping them emotionally connect to the new story. And this can be challenging because there's the mind part. This story isn't working for me. I'm going to choose this story. But then down in here, they don't feel anything different. They're like, yeah, bullshit. That's not right. So I help them connect emotionally to what they want. One of the ways that we do this is through heart math. I don't know if you're familiar, yes, I use a lot of heart math in my work. Practicing gratitude. Yes.
If you could explain, I have an idea of what it is, but if you could explain to the listeners, what is heart math?
Yeah. So heart math is an evidence-based intervention to help people connect to higher feeling states of joy, gratitude, love, unconditional love, appreciation, awe, and wonder for your life. Most people rely on doing something outside to get that feeling. They date somebody, they buy a handbag, they buy the car, they get the new job, and then like a few weeks later, they're empty again. So it's a roller coaster. they're happy, then most of the time they're sad. Their emotional home is like, there's something wrong with me, or I'm anxious. Heart coherence and heart math helps your body, helps your heart and your brain communicate together and memorize a new emotional set point, a new emotional thermostat setting. Most people who live in fight or flight, their heart rhythm is very erratic. When their heart rhythm is erratic, their brain waves are erratic, so they can't change their behavior from that state. They have to be in what is called a coherent heart rhythm and a coherent brain. And so coherence means that you're relaxed, you feel safe, trusting in the unknown. And when you are able to relax and slow your heart rhythm down and slow your brain rhythm down, when you then pull up a moment in your life or a moment in time, or think of a memory, it's a lot easier to pull up a feeling of gratitude from that place, usually. And it's easier for your brain to rewire into gratitude. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It sounds to me, you tell me if I've got it, but it sounds like it's getting your brain and your heart in sync with one another so that they're flowing together. It sounds like a lot of the work that Joe Dispenza does, Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Yes, he uses a lot of heart math. Absolutely.
Yeah. And
Yes.
so it's about changing the feeling that's inside, which, if I'm understanding you correctly, then changes that set point. It changes you don't go back down to anxiety at the same depth or level that you used to. That becomes
Yes.
your default goes up, in other words. Am I getting it?
Yes, absolutely getting it. Yes.
So, that sounds wonderful. Like, the work that you do is so important, because so many people think, in my world, like in the divorce world, well, when I get a divorce, which is often traumatic, especially if you've got a toxic relationship, that doesn't usually happen easily. Okay, judge says I'm divorced, I should be healed, right? And I see you shaking your head no. So the work that you do, it sounds like this is something that, especially if somebody has been through a difficult divorce or a toxic relationship or any kind of trauma in their life, like, this is what they need to be doing to heal. It has nothing to do with the legal system or the finances or anything like that. Is that right?
Right. In my experience, when I work solely with women right now, although I'm working on changing that. In my experience, the divorce is a wake-up call to a pattern that she's had long ago, right? So
Interesting.
we're looking at, okay, how can I break this cycle? How can I break this pattern? Because what I've seen, unfortunately, is that there are a lot of people who get a divorce and they think they're healed, and then they get on a dating app, and I would be a millionaire for the times that I have seen people do this, and they meet someone even more abusive, even more narcissistic, even more dysfunctional, and they spend another 5 or 10 years with that person. So, yeah.
It sounds like it's almost like the universe saying, like, until you do this work, we're just going to keep making it worse, right? Until you finally get the message.
Yeah. The proverbial cosmic 2x4 gets larger, and, the signs from the universe get more glaring, and yeah, so it's,
but then how do you work with the person or help the person who says, like, they're trying to do the inner work and the outer work as well. They're already divorced, or that relationship is behind them, but now they don't trust themselves. I've heard so many people say, I think my picker is broken, right?
yeah.
How do you help them build that trust in themselves that will allow them to like get into a new and healthy relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to what I mentioned before, the inner and the outer. So turning their focus inward, having that daily somatic work as an anchor to regulate their emotions and to release. So sometimes people, will have, sit in meditation or do a yoga practice and they start crying all of a sudden. They're like, where is all this coming from? And it's just your body needs to let that go. You probably suppressed this emotion or this experience, and you probably try to distract yourself, or you didn't want to feel it several months ago, and now here it is. So it doesn't really go anywhere. So the somatic work to create that balance, to create that heart coherence, to create that brain coherence, so that we can like start shifting their beliefs easier. And then having them step out of their comfort zone every week. That creates trust. Anytime, when somebody, and a lot of people have resistance to doing the work, it's normal. They're like, I'm too busy. I don't have time to sit down and meditate, or I don't have time to do my yoga practice. Or, I don't want to I don't want to take myself on this date. But when they recognize that resistance is just fear, and it's part of their old self, their protective self, that's trying to keep them in the comfort zone, and they reconnect to what they want, and they take the step, even though it's scary, that creates self-trust. A lot of times when people book the call with me, they've been thinking about it for a while and they've talked themselves out of it like a lot. Just booking the call creates trust, because they either watch the training or they listen to a podcast or they read an email, and everything, it hits home, and they're like, I have to book this call, and they do it. That creates trust. So it's an inner married with the outer, and doing that work consistently, that creates that trust, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. But you mentioned doing the training, and I know you have a free training. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So this is a free masterclass or webinar. I don't really like the term webinar because it sounds so like webinar-y. But it's a free 45-minute training, and it gives the high level overview of how I get my clients results, how we get results. So it's a 5-step blueprint that is less of a how-to and more of a, ooh, I've got to shift the way that I'm thinking. So it's meant to shift somebody's perceptions about what they're believing now and what they believe is possible for them in the future. So, yeah, that's Break the Cycle. It's about 45 minutes. And again, a high level overview. And then we give some client case studies in there so people can see real life results and where they were before and where they are after, so they can see that transformation and know that hopefully it's possible for them. And then for people who feel like they're a good fit, there's an invitation to book a free breakthrough call at the end of that training.
Interesting. And where can people find the training?
BethanyDotson.com. The direct link, it's on my homepage, like you can't miss it. The direct link is BethanyDotson.com/masterclass.
That sounds really fascinating. But talking about beliefs, what if somebody isn't sure they believe they can? I mean, can you work with somebody who isn't convinced that it's possible for them? Like, it might be possible for the rest of the world, but not for me.
So that's a great question. I'm a coach. I'm not a magician. So in my experience, somebody has to have at least some belief that it's possible for them. If somebody is so deeply entrenched to it's not possible for me, yeah, it can happen for them, it can't happen for me, and they're not willing to see a different perspective and choose that perspective, I'm not sure if anything would truly work until they're ready, because there's still a lot of fear leading the way, and that person may be better served with a clinician or a trauma-informed therapist to help them with that fear. I do use trauma-based interventions here, but because this is coaching, it's really designed for somebody who knows that it's possible. They may have a big voice at the same time going, I don't know. They want a relationship. They want that outcome. They want that result, but there's still the devil on their shoulder going, well, you failed. You always pick narcissists. I can work with people in that realm, right? But if somebody is so like, it'll never happen for me, and they're really, there's a lot of fear around stepping out of that belief, that would be somebody better served in trauma therapy, in my opinion.
That makes a lot of sense, but it sounds like, somebody can come to you and they don't have to know for sure that everything is possible for them, that they can have the relationship of their dreams, that they can calm themselves. They don't have to be 100% convinced, but they have to at least have the door open, like they're open to the possibility. Am I hearing you right?
Absolutely. And even if somebody, I would say a lot of people that I talk to, at least on an initial breakthrough session, don't believe it's possible for them. The door is open, but part of what we do in that call is get them extremely clear on what that life with a great partner would feel like. And we get super specific and juicy. And so, usually if somebody is a good fit, they're willing to go there, even though it's like, oh my gosh, this is a little uncomfortable, but they're still willing to keep moving toward that vision, and emotionally connect to that. So I would say a lot of people that I talk to, on some level, don't think it's possible for them. They want it, but we kind of break down those barriers in that breakthrough call. We get real. It's not a comfortable conversation. we take away all of the coping mechanisms and all of the hiding places, and we get to the heart of the matter. And we get people connected to what they want emotionally, in a way that they probably haven't felt before. And then they can make the decision to move forward and use our support to help them get there or not. So it's a win-win, in my opinion.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that even somebody who has had a pattern of trauma and bad relationships or toxic relationships in their life, if they are willing to step out of their comfort zone, if they're willing to get the help and do the work, it actually is possible for them to change and have the great relationship.
Yeah. And I would add, not only is it possible, those people who say yes in spite of all their trauma usually have soaring success. They are my best clients. They defy the odds. They inspire me to keep doing what I'm doing. I would say the people who have a lot of trauma and have a lot of hurt and have a lot of trust issues, yet are willing to try again and are unwilling to live the rest of their lives with the blinds closed and the doors locked and the guard gate up around their heart. Those people who realize that is not the future that they want, those people break cycles. So it is possible. They prove that it's possible, and they usually surprise themselves and oftentimes myself with how great life can be afterwards. So it is very possible.
This is the perfect place to bring this to an end, because you've given, I think, a lot of people hope where they didn't maybe see that there was a lot of hope before. And the work that you do is fascinating. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Can you tell people where they can find you?
Yes. You can find me on Facebook. My business page, Bethany Dotson Relationship Coach, is what you could search. I am on Instagram, Bethany Dotson. Those are the two main places that you can find. Oh, I'm also on YouTube, and I have a podcast myself. Break the Cycle on Spotify, with Break the Cycle with Bethany Dotson on Spotify. And then you can just Google or YouTube Bethany Dotson, and you'll see my channel, my videos there.
Bethany, thank you so much for sharing all of your insight and wisdom and hope with so many people. I really, really appreciate it. And for everyone out there listening and watching, if you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a big favor, give it a thumbs up, like, subscribe, share, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.